Hey, how's it going? This is Todd from Shutterstock, and I'm going to continue our series on the exposure triangle. So in the last video, we covered iris, and then you have shutter, and then you have ISO. So in this video, I'm going to cover shutter. Now with taking still photos, shutter speed is always measured in a fraction of a second, or how many seconds the shutter is open. So that means that literally for 1/250th of a second, the shutter was open. And that's obviously extremely fast. But with stills, you can have a shutter speed up to infinite. You can literally hold down the bulb function on your camera and have the shutter open for as long as you want. So what does shutter speed look like physically? So when you take a photo, there's these little curtains that basically just goes and it does it really fast. And during that period of time, that's when the image that you take hits whatever recording medium you're using and creates your image. It's the amount of time that light is getting in to hit your sensor. So the faster your shutter speed, the less amount of time and the less amount of light that's passing through. Video cameras work exactly the same way, except it just does it a whole lot of times over and over. Sometimes you will see it as a fraction of a second, or sometimes you'll see it as something called shutter angle. So basically, if you have a circle and you count the whole thing as 360 degrees, shutter angle is the sliver of that circle that is allowed to be left open as the shutter basically spins. Now that's how it works on a film camera. Modern day digital camera sensors use a different type of shutter system, but the same idea applies. So if you took a full 360 degree circle and you cut a 90-degree triangle out of it, create like a Pac-Man type shape, that would mean that you had a 90-degree shutter angle. But perhaps the most important effect that shutter speed has on your images in your video is a thing called motion blur. Much like depth of field, motion blur is a tool that you can use or choose not to use, and the easiest way to think about it is that while the camera shutter is open, any light that it captures is going to be exposed in your image. I'm sure you've noticed that if you take a picture when it's really dark out, everything gets super blurry. That's because your shutter is opening itself longer to accommodate for needing more light. So changing your shutter speed can have a stylistic effect. So if you have a really high shutter speed and you're doing, some moving around with the camera, some handheld stuff, you'll notice it has a jittery kind of look. The movie Saving Private Ryan was a really notable example of that effect being used. And for video, a kind of baseline shutter speed is always going to be 180 degrees for shutter angle, or if you're using the fraction style measurement system, usually you want to go for double your frame rate. So if you're shooting at 24 frames per second, you're going to want to have about 1/50th of a second shutter speed. Anything you do beyond that is going to have a certain visual effect. And in terms of photography, it's a huge tool in terms of making sure that you get crisp, really sharp photos. A lot of sports photographers always shoot at really high shutter speeds, and obviously if you're trying to shoot like a water fountain or something like that, or rain even, if you use a certain shutter speed, the rain won't even be visible, or if you use a much higher shutter speed where you might even get those each individual little droplet. So definitely find ways to experiment with it. It's another way to control your images beyond just the brightness. And as always, thanks for watching. I'll see you on the next one.